Hey everybody, it's Britt Benner and welcome back to another episode of Behind the Stack, where today I'm thrilled to be sitting down with author V. Schwab for her brand new book, Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil. A little bit about V. She is the #1 New York Times bestselling author of more than 25 books. Schwab series and standalone titles for readers of all ages have made her a major literary figure whose notable works include the Villain series, the Shades of Magic universe, and the invisible life of Addie LaRue. When she's not haunting Paris streets or writing in the corner of her favorite coffee shop, she lives in Edinburgh, Scotland. So please enjoy this episode of Behind the Stack. I am so thrilled to be sitting down with V. Schwab, which is so exciting for her new book, Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil. It is so good. It is the #1 indie pick for June. It is starred reviews from both Publishers Weekly and Kirkus. It's getting so much crazy pre-publication and worthy hype. So congratulations and thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you for having me. As you can tell, I've the anxiety it's big right now. It's hope and fear all tangled up, but I don't know what to do with hope and I know what to do with fear, so it just becomes a very loud emotion.
Oh my God. So before we get into the book, and I'm just going to say to our viewers and our listeners, we are going to talk about the book. I don't want to go so deep into the book because I don't want to ruin anything for our readers, and part of it is just the discovery. But I had some just general questions for you.
Of course.
Were you always a reader when you were young? Were you a big reader, and what were your go-tos?
I wasn't. I was an athlete, and I was never a big reader. I could read, but I was like that precocious 10-year-old who was like, I can put my eyes on every word. It's the same thing as reading. But I wasn't a library kid. I wasn't a bookish kid. I never sat still. I have a very restless temperament. And it wasn't until I found a book when I was 11, 12, and for the very first time had the quintessential experience of forgetting that I was reading, right? The same way you go to see a movie and you forget the edges of the screen and your mind plays a trick on you. The same thing happens when you're reading and the story starts playing a film in your mind and you stop seeing ink on paper. And it really wasn't until I had that experience that I realized, oh, this is what people are talking about. And because I'm me, my experience wasn't, oh, I want to just feel that way all the time. It was, oh no, I want to do that to other people. I want to make movies play in their head. I want to be able to control the hallucination.
And do you remember what one of those books was that did that to you?
Of course I do. I mean, this is the messiness of life, Brett. It was Harry Potter, and I have a very conflicted relationship with it, of course, because of Rowling, not because of Harry Potter.
Right.
It's hard, especially as a gay, as a member of the queer community. It's very hard to have something so formative become something so difficult and problematic. But yeah, it was the first time that I felt like I was somewhere else and I was someone else. And it's I don't want to revise my own history because of her. It's still so important to me, or it's so important to who I was. It can't be important to who I am. That makes sense.
Sure, that makes sense. Yeah, you don't deny it, but it is a.
Yeah, it's and I struggle, especially as a writer now. I really don't like to separate artist from art. I know some people are really good at it. I simply can't. I'm too aware of the art outside the frame, so to speak. So I have a really hard time. It's my personal choice to not separate artist from art, simply because as somebody who works in the arts, I like to have the context. Certain creators, they're knowing more about them makes me respect the work even more. The unfortunate flip side of that is knowing about them can make me not get to have that escapist feeling that I had when I was 11, 12, right? I don't get to have the same purity of experience.
Absolutely. Did you read Monster?
No.
Claire Didier. It's the whole idea. This is the whole thing about separating the art from the
Oh wait,
artist
this is
and
the
from,
nonfiction. Yeah.
correct.
This is about like cult of personality and art versus artist.
Yes, it's
Yes.
Picasso and Michael
Yeah.
Jackson and all of it. And it falls right into all of this, what you're talking about. But it is. And I think what's hard about who you're talking about is it just continues to become doubling down and it's so active.
That's the thing. You're
That's what
like,
makes
it's
it.
not like, oh, somebody messed up 10 years ago and like, they said something questionable. It's just like the deniability is gone, right? Your
That's right.
window of plausible deniability has expired by now. And it's
Yes.
hard because have very famously spoken about, but famously, I don't know why I use that word. I have very publicly declared my kind of like creative lineage in a lecture series that I did for Oxford back in 2018. And you have to understand, like, I had two heroes growing up. I had the one that made me a reader, and I had the one that made me a writer. And the one that made me a reader was Rowling, and the one that made me a writer was Gaiman. And
Mm.
over the last decade, to essentially
Wow.
have to like, bury your heroes. And it's really challenging as a creator who can like pinpoint so many of the vital moments of my own like sense of self within publishing and within creativity, like my favorite memories, my most important moments. And like there's like a corrupted hard drive element, right? There's a sense of like,
Yeah.
oh, I remember going through each and every one of them and just basically quietly burning each one because I didn't want to be able to just like do the thing my brain would do, which was to reflect back on like the moment I felt this way because a hero saw me, you know?
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
hard not to like start this conversation on a complete
No, no,
downer,
no.
but it's formative and it's so hard to have heroes. I remember having a very dark conversation with a friend who like her hero was a famous filmmaker that very recently died. And I have a very dark sense of humor, I should say to anybody listening. Thankfully, so does she. And I said, well, like, at least he died before he disappointed you. And that meant like, but it's true. Like, people who have Tolkien tattoos, I'm like, you're probably safe at this point. Like, I think you're going to be like, like there's a, I'm sorry that you have the Deathly Hallows. Like, I'm sorry about that. But like, it's, there's a sense of like, preservation, and so part of me wants to preserve the impact that those books had on me because they're such a part of like, I don't think I become a writer without them as my lineage. There was such a profound impact at such a profound moment, and then at the same time you're like just de-pedestaling each thing and realizing that like my agent says a thing, which is just because something has served you in the past doesn't mean it has to serve you now. Like it can be part of your
Mm.
origin story and not part of your present story.
Meanwhile, I'm still stuck on the idea that there's a whole subdivision of people, like on a Reddit right now, talking about what tattoo they have from Tolkien.
Oh,
Uh,
I mean, like
that,
this is why I never get bookish tattoos. I don't get any art tattoos because I have just a distrust of the effects of time.
right. So you always seem to have like, you have so many different things firing at the same time in your brain and
Yeah.
probably on the page or in your computer. Do you consider yourself a highly disciplined writer?
Ooh, that's an interesting question. I think I am a compulsive creative. I am
Ah,
a relentlessly creative person. I wish I had more discipline in specific ways. I'm very disciplined in that, like, I pretty much work every day. I don't really take a
mm.
vacation from myself. I can't, even if I wanted to. If I'm conscious and sober, I'm working. It's just like I have to
Do you have a
either
set time?
huh?
Do you have a set time that you write, or is it
I
just
start
when
in
it?
the morning because if I don't start in the
Mm.
morning, I can't do it in the afternoon. The later in the day it gets without me making some kind of progress. Now, progress looks differently depending on what stage of a project I'm in. We were just talking about before we started here that I'm basically less than 2 weeks out from a book release. Time is not on my side here. Focus is not on my side, but I also don't want to waste the 2 weeks. Waste being a word that goes on in my head all the time around quotation marks, right? Waste. What does waste look like? It could be called rest, but for me, I'd say I don't want to
Mm.
waste. And so I'm essentially compulsively outlining. I'm making notes. I essentially sit down for 2 hours every morning and I just like free think ideas about of something I'm working on. So it's not just free writing, but it's like, okay, well, what's happening? Where did I leave this character? What could happen here? And I essentially just for 2 hours straight in this kind of phase that I'm in, will just take notes, just in
Mm.
conversation with myself on paper, trying to sort things out. And so I think it looks like discipline. I think it feels like discipline. At the same time, I had to look through 17 separate Word documents to compile these notes because I had scattered them to the wind. So I think that might just be ADHD, not a lack of discipline. Like I was making something for dinner last night and I realized I needed dill and I found a jar of dill and then I was like, oh, and I also need chives. And I went looking for chives and I found 7 more jars of dill. So I think there's like, my brain says that's a lack of discipline, but I think it's just a lack of like boots on the ground, 2 feet in reality at all times focus.
I feel like
But
you're my soulmate right now.
I am very disciplined in that, I know the next 6 books that I'm writing and I
Wow.
will make notes kind of compulsively on them depending on where I'm at. I will always have kind of like a dugout full of things on deck. So I don't have a lot of lost time, I would say. Maybe that looks like discipline.
Sure. But then how do you wake up on Monday and say, oh, you know
Yep.
what? Number 5 is calling to me. I
Yeah.
got to go with that
Yeah.
today.
Oh, no, I
Is
don't
that
do that.
really how it,
No, 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 no,
okay.
no. I mean, like those 5 are in an order as well. And I have a
Okay.
pretty good
Okay.
sense of the order in which
Like
they're going to
batter up, like you're
happen.
saying, dugout.
Yeah, very batter up. For right now, I'm letting it be a little bit more haphazard because like I'm kind of looking and outlining 2 things, and I know which one I'm going to have to write first, but I don't have to pick the order on the outlining. So as I'm
Mm.
ideating and kind of dropping notes in, I have a very long ideating process. So basically, before I actually write a novel, I will spend at least a year planning the novel. I will
Wow.
outline, build character, build set pieces, and essentially arrange the note cards, the storyboard for the entire book in a narrative order, and then break it out into a chronological order for each perspective. And then
Wow.
when I have all those components, then I will know that, okay, for the next 6 months of my life, that's what I'm writing.
It's weird because it's almost in some ways, and I get it, like, especially I get it with this, it's almost like you're writing individual short stories and then bringing
It's
them all together into
exactly.
one greater
I mean, I
piece.
think that's how I cheat my brain into not quitting. Because the fact
Mm.
is, like, the thing I'm looking at today is books 5 and 6 of the Shades of Magic / Threads of Power series. Like, Shades of Magic's 1, 2, 3, Threads of Power is 4, 5, 6. It is daunting with a capital D, daunting to say the least. And so, if I were to sit down and think, today I'm working on book 5, what a horrifying concept. Like I shrivel as I think about that. It's too big, it's too much, it's too scary. And so what I will do is essentially spend a lot of time breaking the idea of a book down into a series of escalating episodes, the way like a 10 set
Yeah.
episode of television. So I really try to look, it also helps me get away from the concept of a saggy middle. And so what I'll essentially try to do is instead of looking at it as a 3-act structure, I'll look at it loosely as 10 episodes. And then I
Wow.
have 10 individual kind of miniature arcs of activity, 10 set pieces. And then in each set piece, I kind of break it down into scenes so that when I sit down to write, instead of facing down a book or even a section of the book, I'm facing down like 10 feet in front of me.
That makes so much sense. That makes so much sense. And I'm picturing like a massive whiteboard in front of you with dry erase markers.
Wouldn't that be great? Because where that whiteboard
Like a
exists
writer's room.
is in my head. Like
Yeah.
that's the
Yeah.
worst part is like the vast majority of the whiteboard is not in a physical space, which plagues every person in my life with so much fear. It is like I am like one aneurysm away from it. Nobody gets anything, right? Nobody gets anything. I like to say I leave it encoded so that nobody can Harper Lee me. Like if I like go off, nobody can finish the work because it's not going to make sense to anybody
Right.
else. Also,
But the
please, I don't
fan
want to get
fiction is going to be.
canceled. I don't want to get canceled on the internet for turning Harper Lee into a verb in this context. So I'm sorry, everybody. Forgive that it's 13 days before release and I have no filter. But
Oh
yeah,
my God.
but it is logic. It's logical to a fault, and I think a lot of people think that takes the excitement or like the creativity out. But the truth is that year of brainstorming is my creative place.
Wow. That's incredible.
Yeah.
So you have, listen, you have this arguably a rabid fan base, right? And you have people
I
that
hope
have
so.
followed you. You
Yeah.
really do. You have a really large group that has followed you from your start.
Yeah.
And you're also, and I think that that has exponentially really kind of exploded even more after Addie LaRue. You're also really present on social media. You're very generous to your
Yeah.
followers. You are there. You are giving stuff. How do you find the balance? And also, how do
Mm,
you learn to stick to your own vision and not be influenced
yeah.
by these voices outside saying, what about this? What about this? Can we have this? How do you do that?
I mean, I'm stubborn. I also think it's
Mm,
important to remember that I started really young. And so one of the reasons that I'm persistently accessible online, even though I'm at a point in my career where probably would be better for my mental health to be less accessible online. But the whole thing was that I started when I was 19. That's when I signed with my first agent. And sold my first book at 21. And the thing that I noticed at the time, earlier days of social media, obviously, but the thing that I noticed is just there was no transparency. Like you were felt so lonely. The only time authors ever posted was to share good news. They never
mm,
posted about the creative difficulties, really, because it was seen as like gauche, right? It was seen as like, don't do it. And I just felt like this is designed to isolate each and every one of us. This is designed for like, it feels tailor made for neuroses and for insecurity. And then when something goes wrong in publishing, you think you're the only person it's ever happened to because no one's talking. And so the decision I made for myself, kind of day one back in 2009, was I'm just going to be as honest as I can in the hopes that like if anyone else is struggling in the same way, it'll feel less lonely. And so what that means 15 years in is like I still am just doing that in the hopes that if a writer who's just starting or a writer who's not just starting but struggling can see me struggling 25 books in, then they know that like it's the same thing. Like it can feel really heartening to know. Like I wish I could say that it gets easier. It doesn't get easier, but you can at least know that
yeah.
like it's the same struggle, and it's not it can feel like an indictment. Like when you're struggling creatively and you don't see other people struggling creatively, it can feel like an indictment on your own creative ability instead of just the fact that like art is hard. Like being
Yeah.
vulnerable in art is hard, making good art is hard, improving is hard. And so I think like I'm accessible because I've really believe in that. It has gotten harder because I know that the larger the audience, and like I'm no longer an underdog. I was an underdog for like
Right.
12 years in publishing, right? And I'm very aware of the fact that like I am no longer an underdog. But I think if you've been an underdog for long enough, that kind of spirit is still there. Like I always feel slightly anti-establishment. And I always
Mm,
feel just like really self-aware of the vulnerability and the volatility of the establishment. And so I kind of just like over at my desk focusing on getting the work done. And so I feel really comfortable being super transparent about that because I want anyone else who's getting the work done to know that like they have community by virtue of the fact that they've showed up and that they're not quitting.
that's great. All right. So for our listeners, for our viewers,
Mm.
do you have an elevator pitch for Bury Our Bones?
I mean, the three-word headline, right, is toxic lesbian vampires. It's the story of three women over the course of 500 years and how their lives, deaths, and lives again intertwine. It's the story of falling out of love. It's the story of collateral damage. And it's the story of a one-night stand gone horribly wrong. Yeah, it's a book about the idea of vampirism as a motif for autonomy and agency,
Mm,
and especially about like agency within the context of queer history. It's
mm,
also about being messy. It's about hunger. I guess if I was supposed to pitch this, right? I'm so bad at pitching. It's just about hunger. It's about hunger in every form it takes, specifically for women and femme presenting people. Um, it is about the hunger to be seen, to be loved, to be understood, and to take up space in a world that tries to make you small. It's like have
you're
17
fine.
elevator pitches tacked together,
No, you're fine.
pretending to be an
I always say
explanation.
this building could be as long as you need to be. Um, it, it's so funny because when I was putting stuff together last night, I did think for me, this is like a merging of, and we'll talk about the Anne Rice connection in a second, but Interview
Yeah.
with the Vampire with The Hunger, literally the movie
Oh,
The Hunger.
yes. Yeah.
And I have to say, like, for everybody who's listening or watching, if you've never seen The Hunger, you
Oh,
definitely
see it.
should, just for the shits and giggles of it. But also, if you don't even watch the movie, the trailer itself
Yeah.
is so genius
Yeah.
because everything they were doing in the 80s with the voiceover and the like, she was meant for something more, all of it with
Yeah.
like beautiful Catherine Deneuve and David Bowie looking amazing and Susan
Oh, it's
Sarandon being
phenomenal.
sexy. And
It's
it's so
phenomenal.
great. But it's so
Well, and
that.
this is very much
Um,
like, so I always joke that it's the interview with the vampire meets Killing Eve. It's like
oh,
really
yeah.
just
Oh,
about like antagonistic women. It is like, it's much more, people are always like, oh, like Twilight. And like, it's much more a love letter to Interview with the Vampire and Only Lovers Left Alive and A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night. Like, there's a lot that it's in conversation with. It's not really in conversation with a lot of the modern and contemporary vampire culture,
no.
because I'm really interested in the like inherent queerness of the original vampire canons and the original vampirical works. I just wrote can't remember if it was called a forward or an introduction. I should really be better about this, but I just wrote a piece to go at the beginning of Carmilla, a new edition of Carmilla
Mm,
and the Vampire, a combo. So I just reread them, and like it's just so interesting. I expected, it was the first time I actually read Carmilla, and I was really expecting to be blown away by how steamy and lesbian it was. And I was like, oh, it's not. Like, it's still written by a dude. It's still like it's still about the concept of like how dangerous the forbidden fruit of a knowledge is, how dangerous the allure of
mm,
another life. And so that's really what I was really interested in, looking at that in the context of queer history and the idea that like young queer people often require a mentor of sorts, especially in past historical periods, to come into their life and tempt them and say, did you know that there's another way to live? And that's
mm.
wonderful and that's enabling. But I was like, okay, but what if that person who came into your life, because there's an intoxication to being seen and perceived as yourself for the first time, what if that person was also super bad for you? Because like we get into these toxic relationships, especially early on in our own queer journeys, more often than not, because we are so infatuated with the idea of being authentically perceived that we perhaps don't always wonder if the person perceiving us is the best for us. So I
Sure.
was interested in that element of Carmilla, and also just like general history. And then the thing I love about Interview with the Vampire is how messy they are. Like, they're such messy gays. They're such messy queer men. And it also, especially the television adaptation, which took a lot of the subtext from the film and made it text, really explored domestic violence within the queer
Mm,
community in a way that I hunger for, because I hunger for, not that I hunger for domestic violence, I hunger for removing queer characters from pedestals and letting them be as messy as their straight
right.
because when we have to exist on pedestal, it suggests, one, that we don't have that level of complexity, which is false, and two, that we're not allowed to have that narrative complexity. And so I was really excited to see that on screen, because I was like, oh, okay, like we're ready. We're gonna explore what it means to be in some real toxic relationships. But the last thing I'll say is that I also wanted to play with the idea of the collateral damage left in an epic love story's wake, especially when it's between monsters. Like, you have Louis and Lestat, who have varying levels of complicity, of course, but they are leaving so many dead bodies and so many people in their wake. And you look back at like the Marvel era, when they finally figured out that they should like address the fact that the Marvel superheroes were destroying cities and that like people's lives were being hurt. And I just kept thinking about like, what is happening to all these people that they are biting or murder? Like, they
Right.
had lives.
The lives ruined in their wakes, the
So,
families that
like,
have been left
this is
behind.
the thing. I was like, this is truly a story about the collateral damage of somebody else's epic love.
So here's my question for you then. The
Yeah.
genesis of all this and when this came up, was it literally like, I want to write a book that has about vampires? Or what was that initial spark for you that said, hey, I want to do this? And also leaning into the queerness of it all, did you say,
Yeah,
look, I want to do something that really plays in the queer
sure.
space in a way that I haven't done before?
Yeah, I think there
And
yeah.
why and why?
I think there were several factors. It was right in the wake of Addie LaRue, which is a story about an immortality deal. And even though Addie LaRue is a story about an immortality deal with the devil, essentially immortality deals follow a form, and vampiric immortality deals are exactly the same. It's a transactional thing in which something is lost and something is gained. And so I wanted to write another immortality deal. I didn't want it to be another deal with the devil. So there was that was planted in my mind. Could I write a different kind of immortality deal? I wanted to have like a triptych of immortal stories, right? As I'm also just really fascinated by what we do with time, like the liberty that time and immortality gives us, especially what I started to explore is like the freedom from fear. Like moving through the world in a femme presenting body is inherently a violent act. It invites violence, it incites violence. You are automatically perceived as prey. And I started thinking about the fact that like one of the greatest forms of liberation is the moment that you go from being perceived as prey to understanding yourself as a predator. This is a wish fulfillment for a young woman, right? Like to be able to move through the world as Alice does shortly into this book, wherein she realizes for the first time that she does not have to be afraid of men, that men should be afraid of her. Like, what a novelty. So the radicalization of like young women just being like, what if I didn't have to be afraid all the time? Was something I wanted to explore. I've always loved vampires. I love the inherent queerness. And to answer your other part of that question, I spent about 14 of the 15 years in publishing trying to assimilate in different ways. You know, I came in as a femme presenting person into the fantasy space, and I tried to downplay the fact I was a woman. And then I came out and I tried to downplay the fact that I was gay. And I kept trying and trying and trying to make mainstream publishing and mainstream readership okay with me, right? And when I say mainstream readership, I mean the people who are reading straight white men. And I realized at some point around Addie that it was never going to work, that all I was doing was essentially marginalizing myself in my own stories. And so in the wake of the success of Addie LaRue, I had this moment with myself where I said, like, if you cannot translate the success of that novel into the freedom to write something without that desire for assimilation, if you have to just translate it into the desire to write boldly, like if you weren't afraid, if you weren't trying to assimilate, if you weren't trying to like not rock the boat, I realized like the wake of Addie was the time to do it. So essentially I went to Tor and I was like, you have been so supportive. You have supported everything I've ever done, and I've just made you a ton of money. And now you're going to support me in what I write next. And credit to Tor, they never blinked. I was like, I'm going to write toxic lesbian vampires. And they never were like, could you think of writing something that might be easier for us to sell? They were on my side from go. They were like, we trust you. We are excited. And then that excitement never stopped. And so I felt like I had this incredible freedom and this incredible privilege to write something knowing that the publisher would support it and support it in a large way. And so that took a boldness I already felt, a fatigue with the industry I already felt, and allowed me the full creative freedom to write this book exactly as I wanted to.
That's amazing. I also find it pretty incredible that this book, which really is about female empowerment, led you and empowered you to do everything you wanted to do and get effectively everything you wanted to get.
Oh,
It's
yeah, it
almost
was a
like
conversation with this work. Like writing this book helped me so much in my own queerness, because for so long, like people still didn't perceive me as gay. Like everyone, like my books never made queer lists despite the fact the cast were queer. Everyone just like, I just always seemed to be straight passing. And because of that, I never felt like I actually belonged at all. And the writing of this book helped me take up space, which is so funny because it's like a book about taking up space. But I have such a special relationship with this novel now because it has allowed me to speak boldly and unapologetically and articulately about something that for 15 years I felt like I should just tone down in the interest of success, in the interest of mainstream appeal. And like, I'm super grateful. I'm grateful to the publisher because they gave me that whole support, like with their whole chest going in. And I know that's something that so few books get, but I'm just really grateful that then what resulted from it is like, there's always a chasm between the thing in your mind and the thing that ends up on paper. And the goal over the course of editing is to narrow the gap. But this is truly, it's my 25th published work. And of everything I've ever written, it is the narrowest gap between the thing in my mind and the thing on paper. Like it's so
Wow.
imperfect, Brett. It's so flawed, but it does exactly what I want it to do on every single page.
I love that so much. What's funny to me too, because going back to the whole vampiric thing about it, there is this maneuverability in there because of the sexuality. Because I remember, like, I read Interview with a Vampire because Sting wrote a song about it, right?
Yeah.
And so, I remember, and I was obsessed with Sting. And so, like, he would say jump, I would be like, how high?
Yeah.
And so I remember getting that book in a tiny little paperback, and I was falling so in love with these characters and seeing these things that without anything explicit actually existing,
Yeah.
breaking down all walls of kind of gender and sexuality and
Exactly.
everything. And she was redefining this whole thing. And I'm like, and it was the first time too that someone would say, oh, it's fantasy sci-fi, but it was never, it was always considered literature, right? Interview with the
Yes.
Vampire and that whole canon became something else. And that's what so reminded me when you say homage to Anne Rice,
Yeah.
you have done such a beautiful thing with this.
Oh, thank
Not
you.
only not only your movement through time, which is so, and if I have any complaint with the book, it's only that I wanted to live in these spaces longer with each
Yeah.
character.
Yeah.
Like I was like, this is 10 volumes right here. This is like worlds that exist, which I
Yeah.
hope you're going to
I
say,
was I was
oh,
gonna
it
say,
will continue.
yeah, maybe. Who knows? You know, who
Yes.
who who can say? Who can say? What I'll say is that so Addie and Bones are meant to be of the same kind of like set, and it is what I'm calling the
Yes.
garden in my mind, which is essentially to your point. I really wanted to write urban fantasy of the literary aesthetic. And I feel like what
Yes.
Anne Rice did was this deeply romantic literary urban fantasy. And for so
Yeah.
long, I feel like I haven't felt that. And so I was like, the main rule for me as a writer is like, write what you want to read. And I was like,
Yes.
I want to read literary fantasy. Like I
Yep.
want to, and the thing is, I saw that with Addie. Addie got shelved in general fiction. It was the first book of mine that got shelved in general fiction, and it's constantly being read by people who will tell me in their next breath, first breath, I love this book. Second breath, I don't like fantasy. And I'm like, that is fantasy. And they're like, no, but it's not really fantasy. And I'm like, what do you think fantasy is? And they're like, well, it doesn't have magic and dragons and all. And I'm like, fantasy is any departure from reality. And specifically, I want to write literary, like grounded fantasy, which feels like it's happening in our world in time, like that it's an art of noticing problem then, right? It's not that you can only access the world that I'm writing about through the pages of this book, like with Tolkien. Like I'm telling you that like you might have passed Addie LaRue on the street, and I'm telling you that you might have been in a coffee shop that had songs playing that you couldn't hear. I'm telling you to like pay attention to the way that the inexplicable or the strange or the monstrous intertwines with history, is born out of it, is in conversation with it. Like I wanted to write something that made me feel the way the Vampire Lestat made me feel when I read it for the first time. And so that's what I mean by a love letter. It's a conversation with certain dynamics and things that I didn't feel like I saw in books from that time, but it's also just a love letter to the like the warm bath of what fantasy can feel like.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, there's something I said, like Sabine, who is one of the three
Yeah,
women in the novel.
it's my favorite.
She, to me, I was going to ask you who your
It's my
favorite
favorite.
was, but Sabine to me is a little like if the Claudia in the Interview with the Vampire novel had been given time to grow
I
up before
know,
she had been
right?
turned, what
Yeah.
she could have become.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's three such distinct characters. One starts in
Mhm.
1532 Spain, one starts in 1837, and one in
Yeah.
1991 Harvard.
Well, and there's
I'm
one other thing I want. There's only one other way in which I
yes,
want to be playing with Anne Rice, and that's that if you look at so much of the book and now what's happening in the television show, because I just feel like the television show is such a beautiful work, is the concept of perceptual reality. And what I mean by that is for 9/10 of the TV show, you meet one version of Lestat, and it's a fictional version that is living in Louis's memory. And then in the
mm,
last episode currently that we have, you meet Lestat as he actually is in real time. And then the difference between how we remember people and how they actually are, and the concept that now in the next season we're going to see a different version of Lestat again, that is perceived as he perceives himself. And like, I am so interested in that. And so this book is written in 3 perspectives. And the only thing that I would say to readers before they pick it up is think about who's telling the story at what point.
Wow.
I learned this coming back from fantasy, where I was like, I would write a character in one book and I would tell the reader almost nothing about them so the reader could make a snap judgment. And then over the next book or 2, I would pick apart the reader's judgment by telling you more context about why they were the way they were. And it becomes much harder to hate someone when you get to know them.
Sure, sure. Oh my God, I love that. They did
Yes.
have to ask you, if someone offered you the chance to become a vampire, would you take it?
100%. In a second. I would have done Addie LaRue's deal, and that's the worst deal. So, like, yeah, happily. I live in fear of running out of time. It's a theme in all of my books. I would do it in a second. Would you do it?
I would do it if I could. I wouldn't do it now. I would do it if I could back up like 15 years.
Yeah.
Because I want to be. One of the things that time does is make you look back and remember, like this is such a weird thing. I'll probably lose listeners because of this. But I was jokingly saying to my kids one day, when you're older, take naked pictures of yourself before you're too old, because you'll never feel beautiful, but you're always going to look back and be like, God, I was beautiful. And that's what I always feel like. I look back now and think you're so insecure and your body dysmorphia and all the other things.
Yeah.
And so now I would say, oh, I would do it if I could go back. I want that experience of, like, in the book about talking about reading and how many books there are and how many things to experience.
I know, Charlotte's
or just
like,
learning a language.
Yeah,
Yes.
the novelty of time. Like, I often say that if I could have a superpower, it would just be a pause button, because I just want to be able to like stop for a second and catch my breath and like have a year to just read and have no time. Like, that's my thing is I think I could live 5 to 6 lifetimes. Would I want to live for 50 of them? No. But it's also the reason I don't buy the concept of immortal ennui, which is another thing that, like, I don't get it. The concept of immortals being like, I'm so fatigued, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm like, there's always an out button. Like, walk into the sun. You can like
That's
stake
exactly
yourself. Right. Pay someone else to stake you. You obviously want to be here. You obviously are still here. So
because there's always the promise of what else and what's next and who else and who next. That's the thing to me. It's the discovery of what else could be out there. What corner of the world haven't I overturned yet?
Although, God, I think I just have such a fascinating, I mean, like, having just seen Sinners for like the 4th time, I'm also so fascinated by the concept of how race plays into that, though, because obviously, like, speaking as 2 white people, and like at the end of that movie, someone is asked, like, would you like to be made a vampire so that you can keep going? And this man is like, you know what, I think I've seen it. He's like, I think I'm done. I think I'm done.
But my God, props to Sinners, and props, the musical sequences alone are so next level, beyond brilliant.
There's a surrealist moment in there that, like, where the barn is burning down perceptually from the outside. And I just, this is the kind of art, like, I walked out of that film and I was, nothing in this world makes me more excited than art that makes me want to make art. And it's so rare. And when I feel it, sometimes it's a song, sometimes it's a movie, sometimes it's a book. But if I walk out of some place and I just think, I want to go get a pen and paper and like feel the way that movie made me feel, I'll be happy for a year.
It's incredible. He's a genius. Like, the whole thing, the cast across the board. So
but
amazing.
Weirdly, it's what makes me, like, that's the best praise I ever shoot for as an author, is I want to write books that make other writers want to write books, if that makes sense. Like, I want to have that transmission of creative energy, like, where it's almost just a verve. Like, I just want to write something that makes somebody else want to write something.
Well, this certainly, I mean, to say, like, is it a bad dad joke or too punny to say it's delicious and you should sink your teeth into
I've made so many. I'm like, do you want a first bite? Like, you can go get a taste of it online. I hope it sinks its teeth into you. I'm so glad it got under your skin. Like, I've got them all.
You do. I also have to say, just on a side note, I love about any vampire novel or any vampire movie, whatever, is the mythology that the creator creates, right? And the rules.
Yeah.
And I'm not giving anything away in this, but I love what you do that's similar and what you do that's different.
The erosion.
I think it's great. And
I just think I want all of my fantasy to come down to human psychology. And I think, like, so for me, I also have to come from a place of logic, and I'm like, why aren't there more vampires? Like, why aren't we overrun? And I'm like, okay, well, there must be a self-destructive element. Well, how do we get a self-destructive element? Well, what if over time they decay morally and existentially, and they just become essentially animalistic predators. But that could happen in 10 years, it could happen in 100 years, it could happen in 500 years, depending on your attachment to humanity. And I like the idea that like they end up essentially getting in their own way.
Yeah. It's kind of like our democracy right now in America.
I
Anyway,
was gonna say it's like an addict chasing a high, but it is also like a democracy.
power, all of it, power,
All of it.
corruption, and, you know, and the thirst for more.
Exactly.
Well, this has been just a delight. You are absolutely delightful.
Thank you,
As you know you are. But please, everybody, go out and
yes,
buy the
please
book.
read it. Oh, I've got a finished one because we're on camera. Look at how pretty the finished one is. Look at all this. Oh my God,
it's gorgeous.
It's so pretty.
It is gorgeous. And by the way, buy the damn book because she signed so many of the damn things.
Signed 300,000. So, just put me on an infomercial at this point.
She developed carpal tunnel, and she literally, that's not even a real hand she has anymore.
No.
That's gorgeous. Look at that inside.
You know, we tried.
Yeah, it's a beautiful, it's stunning. It's so, you will be lost in this thing, but I'm really excited for you and for all of it. I think it's so fantastic. So
thank you so much, hon.